to have, so that's kind of how my operation worked, right? At first I was doing it all myself. Then I was like, I can't do this myself anymore. I got to get help. So I had to hire, and you can't hire the best people. I can't take resumes, from the best people. I got to hire the people in my network who are willing to get involved in a large scale criminal operation. But we had shippers, right? And so everybody was compartmentalized. And this way, if everybody only knows their job and they don't know anybody else in the operation, then you can't bust the whole thing.
Yep.
Right. So that was the idea: is we're going to compartmentalize this. I had shippers, and they don't know anybody else in the operation, and I spread it throughout the country. This way, it's not all in one spot. So if one thing gets busted, the whole thing doesn't go down, right? And this actually worked because we got a part got busted, and we were able to keep going.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast with Dave Crosland. I'm Scott McNally, and we are joined today by former steroid king and biochemist Ryan Root. What's going on, brother?
Hey, how are you? Thanks, guys. First thing I want to do is thank both of you for what you have done for the community. Your education and a lot of your information has really helped a lot of people, and I know they all appreciate it, and I've appreciated it as well.
Thank you. I'll take full credit for that. I've done everything I can. Dave, good to have you here, too.
Yeah, I felt like I'd turn up for once.
No, seriously, man. Thank you. We appreciate that. And guys, all of our programming, it's brought to you by evalbloodanalysis.com. If you're in the UK and you're on gear, you're going to need to get your labs done. You can get your labs done by Dave. So go to evalbloodanalysis.com. Get your labs done today if you're in the UK. Plus, we're brought to you by supplementsource.ca. For Canadians, they have great deals that change week to week on label change, short-dated products. And, of course, we're brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for high-quality third-party tested supplements. And last but not least, we're brought to you by you, the people of Patreon. We've got a Patreon question. First, here's what we're going to do, guys, just to give you a heads up. So we got Ryan on. We're going to hear Ryan's story. We have Dave has a PSA he needs to share with us first. We're going to get an update on the whole Primo thing. And then after we hear Ryan's story, we're going to answer your listener questions. So if you don't want to hear any single part of this, you can always go down to the chapters below and click to what you want to hear. But Dave, here's the thing. We've been getting all sorts of people telling us, Primo, it's not being made anymore. The Chinese stopped making Primo. And all of a sudden, the prices are going up. It's not available anywhere. I know you have some insight on this. And, hey, Ryan, you might have some insight on this, too. So I'm opening the floor to you guys. Let's hear the PSA from you, Dave, and let's hear what's going on with Primo.
Right, let me find it now. Just bear with me.
Oh, nice preparation. Nice preparation.
I was prepared, and then you
for minutes that I was going
about.
Ryan, I'm so sorry for this.
This is the shit I have to put up with.
You have to put up with. I put
Yes.
that whole intro in. I worked on that really hard. People tell me I do a good intro, Dave. And we're demonetized because Dave can't watch his language.
Oh, God, it's always my fault. So basically, there's a producer in China, and Primo seems to be the most affected. So basically, they've been pumping out a load of shit Primo to the point where it's putting people in the hospital.
Oh, like bad Primo.
Oh.
Yeah. Massive inflammation, massive swellings. A couple of people that were suspected with sepsis. Now, it came to light with one lab. They've pulled everything. They've pulled all the raws, and they've actually shut down. And they've just said at this point, until they're confident that they can get quality raws, they're just not going to manufacture, full stop. I think a few others are trying to trade through it. They're not. I don't think anyone's trying to hide anything on this. I think just some are trying to trade for it, but he basically said he won't continue. There does seem to be difficulty getting Primo, but it does seem to be still available. I know one lab that's gone to an Indian supplier, which I find surprising, but they have been getting their raws, or some of their raws, batch sample tested, and it's been coming back okay.
All right.
I don't generally trust Indian raws. They're notoriously shit. But yeah, there does seem to be some issues with China. Now, whether that's that they're just not making Primo anymore, or there's just some issues around Primo, I'm not sure. But there definitely is a shortage of decent Primo at the moment, which is affecting prices. It doesn't seem to be driving prices up here as it stands. But that's not to say it won't happen if this continues, particularly with the popularity around Primo at the moment, which is obviously massive.
Well, we did get a message from one of our listeners who said Primo out of stock with Raw seemingly nowhere, and seen prices of Primo rocketing in the UK and labs running out with no end date in sight on when they'll get it back. So it sounds like some places at least, which makes sense, something. And dude, with how popular Primo is today, I can only imagine. It's not like freaking D-ball. Like D-ball, all of a sudden, like D-ball stops being produced, I don't think anybody would notice anymore.
No, I mean, I'm not seeing price jumps, but that's not to say that some people may not have taken advantage of the fact. I think that's probably a reseller thing, where resellers have been pumping prices because they know nobody can get it and they're taking advantage of the situation. I've not seen price jumps within labs themselves too much, but that's not to say it's not happening. It's just I haven't seen any of it. But there is definite problems. But now, with this particular situation, it wasn't just Primo. There was issues with tests not suspending, and a few other issues, which, like I say, it resulted in one lab just saying we're not doing it anymore until we know we can get quality product.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to as nearly as much to the black market as I used to, obviously. But a few of my patients have come to me and said that there's also a massive problem with testananthate and testcipionate, just causing a lot of pain and swelling, which is unusual. I never experienced that.
Right, found what I was looking for. So the supplier, let me find it, is Dewal Biotech. So they're the raw supplier that's been pumping out the shit Primo. But it's also been affecting, like you say, Test Nth and Master and a few other products as well. All right. Now the Test Nth, apparently it was crashing at room temperature.
All right, guys, we'll definitely pay attention to that and watch out, for the products that you're getting. Let's get into Ryan's story. Ryan, you can I call you like a former steroid kingpin? Is that
sure?
Okay, yeah. Because I feel like that's fitting, man. I want to get into this, and here's the thing. I know you've been on a bunch of podcasts at this point. I've gone out of my way to not hear much of your story yet because I want to hear it from you. I want to have this conversation today, so some of our listeners may have heard some of this stuff. Hopefully, we'll also they'll hear some new stuff, and then a lot of us are going to get to hear your story for the first time. So, you were a biochemist before you were a steroid creator, basically. Take us back, man. At one point, you were just a average guy that hadn't been in that world. Who was that guy, and how did he get involved?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I guess it is a, like you're right. I've told the story a lot, and I kind of forget that it is kind of an epic tale of parsimony to profligacy, and then the fall when I was indicted in 2015 in Operation Cyberjuice, and then the kind of a story of redemption, as now I own a hormone HRT TRT clinic, hormonesforme.com.
As you should.
And now I can utilize all of the massive amount of data, empirical data I aggregated to really help people design protocols and really dial people in. Especially using the derivatives. A lot of the medical community just doesn't understand these derivatives. They don't understand how beneficial they can be. They don't know how to use them. And there's a lot of stigma behind the use of all of these compounds. So, and I've just seen this on a level, I successfully got over 20,000 people through the use of hormones. I've just seen this on a level that most people haven't unless they had my history.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it. So yeah, let's get started. And I'll try to make this quick because I know we want to get to questions. I'm going to try to get to do the quick version.
That's all right. We want to hear it, but I appreciate that too, man. We have short attention spans nowadays. Everybody on YouTube, so there's that.
So I guess I could say it probably started when I was 13. I got picked on for being skinny. I was really skinny. I didn't develop like my peers. Consequently throughout my teenage years, I was kind of depressed. I got walked on. I was tired all the time. I had to nap a lot, and I got called lazy. I got called a piece of shit, and people thought I had no ambition. So, you know, but once I got picked on for being skinny, I started working out, and I never looked back. And I would work out hard, 2-hour days, 7 days a week. Sometimes I would do double sessions, just, you know, just trying it. And I found that I would put on half the amount of size as any of my peers while I was doing twice the amount of work. Right. So I just couldn't gain muscle. You know, I couldn't even grow facial hair until in my 20s. Actually, until I couldn't grow a full beard till after I started testosterone. You know, so there was a lot of signs, and I now know I had hormone deficiency my whole life, but nobody would even test me at the time. They said, you know, there's no way anybody in their 20s could have low hormones, so we're not even going to test you. So there was part of the problem with the community right now is we're not taking the data. We're not establishing people's baseline. I think that's important at a relatively young age. So I was walked on. I was depressed. I was a people pleaser. I didn't have any confidence. Then the day came that I took testosterone. When I was 23 years old, I took a relatively simple, small cycle. It was just 1 milliliter per week of Organon Sustanon and 10 milligrams of D-balls a day. 2 of those pink ties. Remember the pink tie British dispensary? Yeah, those were king back then, right? So just that was it, and I blew up. I absolutely hyper responded. My life absolutely dramatically changed. I was suddenly, I put on 32 pounds of muscle and 100 pounds on my bench in about 5 weeks. Nice. I just hyper responded. I was suddenly had energy, ambition, motivation, and now because I looked like my work ethic in the gym, like people respected me, people suddenly wanted to befriend me. I would go into a bar and heads would turn, and then the crowd would like part out of my way all of a sudden. Now somebody would actually, I would accidentally bump into somebody and they would kind of turn a little angry, then see me and then just apologize to me. You know, like this was all different and new to me. I was a plumber during college and during the summers in college, and I hated it. It was terrible. I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. I hated every minute of it, and I was terrible at it. So my boss, when I started taking steroids, pulled me aside and just gave me a raise for no better reason than now I stood before him looking stout. Like, these are the kinds of life changes. Like I lived in two different worlds, one before testosterone, one after testosterone. So I happened to be in school. I was always a science guy. I happened to be in school for biochemistry at the time. So I just started tailoring my degree to the study of hormones. I had to learn, why do I feel this way? Why do I feel so good? Why is my life completely different? And why is nobody talking about this? So I just read voraciously. I couldn't put it down. Like most people would, you know, kind of get addicted to a video game. I got addicted to taking in as much information as I could, just read nonstop. And then I started eventually helping people with what I had learned. And a few people, the people I started helping really had dramatic results as well. And then pretty soon I got a name in my local city for if you want to look good and feel your best, and go to this guy and he'll take care of you. So eventually, like I started just helping people to help people, and then I understood that I have to monetize this because it's starting to take some time, and you know. So I developed supply chains. I've always been a social chameleon. Like I can go to my dealer, figure out everything, come up with a better solution, better supply chains, meet his dealer, and then I've always just been able to do that. So I kind of rose to the top of finding suppliers. One day I got a really good supplier, and it will be interesting to hear if you guys know any of these companies or
I'm curious
or suppliers.
too. I'm curious to hear
because so this is kind of old school stuff. So I got a really good supplier. Now, I think to tell my story, it's important to know the zeitgeist at the time. Like this was early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. It's important to understand that testosterone and anabolic steroids were very difficult to get at the time. It was not easy. Fakes were rampant. The fakes were almost more common than the real thing. The young kids today don't know how good they have it. It's easy to get real stuff now.
Oh yeah.
But it wasn't at one time, and fakes were a big thing. The topic on all the forums, all the bodybuilding forums, and all the steroid forums were, how do I get real stuff, and how do I know how to determine what fakes are? So therefore, there was a brand issue, right? People would only accept certain brands. They didn't want to see anything that was outside of just a select few brands that were accepted. And the person selling had to have a brand to themselves. They had to be a trusted seller. So if somebody were just to go on a steroid forum and say, "Hey, I have this stuff for sale," everybody would actually be vehement and angry with him for even trying to suggest that he could sell steroids to people without a name brand or without a name himself.
Yeah.
Right? So I got this really good supplier, and it was probably one of the first very, very large UGLs that kind of turned professional. It was called IP China. Do you guys remember International Pharmaceuticals?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So that I met them in the very beginning, and this is going to make you laugh. So when I first started ordering from like the late 90s or early 2000s, they had this name brand stuff, but they also had stuff that they made, and it used to, and we'd order. It was a lot more cost effective. So we ordered the stuff that they made. Well, it would come in a test tube, right, with a cork on the top.
Okay.
And we would just get it and uncork it and draw the stuff out, inject it, put the cork back on, and that's how it came. It was not professionalized at all, but we grew off the stuff, and it was great. So, but again, like, we couldn't really sell that to anybody because nobody would take stuff in a test tube, right? I mean, and I get that, but it was really good stuff. So slowly, this company started to professionalize, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've actually researched this before, but again, some of the big names that were important that that only people would accept. Some of the big ones at the time were
British Dragon.
British Dragon, right? Well, British Dragon is what I ended up starting to resell. British Dragon, but British Dispensary, Quality Vet was coming out of Mexico, Dencal out of Mexico.
Yeah.
Organon had some good stuff, right?
Yeah.
These were some of the brands, and it had to be these brands, or nobody would trust you. So British Dragon went down in about 2008.
Yeah.
Right? And as soon as they went down, IP China just started slapping British Dragon labels on their stuff.
I remember that. They just started, like, they took over. Now they're British Dragon.
Yeah, they just started.
Do you remember that, Dave?
British Dragon labels on there. And the thing is that a lot of the people knew this.
It's been reincarnated about 5 times.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
More,
Yeah.
to be honest.
And you know, at the time though, again, so people were so scared of fakes that, like, normally, like, this would have been a move that would have scared a lot of people. But the thing is that the IP China with the British Dragon labels was good stuff, and the old British Dragon was good stuff. So it was just kind of, the boards were just saying, if you have British Dragon stuff, no matter the old or the new, it's all good, so it doesn't matter. Right?
Yeah.
So I had been with this company for years, and I had been able to talk my prices down. I had this British Dragon stuff, an accepted brand, and I was getting it for just unheard of prices at the time, like incredibly low prices. And they started making British Dragon pills too. They had the copy. They had pill presses of British Dragon. So I had all this British Dragon stuff. So now I'm selling this stuff, this name brand stuff that people accept, and I have really, really good prices. So one day, one of my clients came to me and said, "Hey, there's this website where people are selling stuff like you. They're doing it online. You have better stuff and better prices than any of those people online. Like, you should go look into this. You could probably make a lot of money." So naturally, I just went and I said, "What is this website?" And so I went to it. Do you want me to say the name?
What was the letters? SSB?
No.
Okay.
Well, it's still going now.
Oh yeah.
We'll have to bleep that out, though. We'll have to bleep that out for YouTube. Yeah.
It was by far, and it still is, the biggest steroid source forum in the world, right? It was at the time, probably still is. And so I went there and I'm looking and I'm like, well, I can beat these prices. Like, I can do this.
Yeah.
So, kind of really quick. So the first thing I didn't understand the process at all. But what I did is I bought some extra steroids. I had a duffel bag full of steroids in my laptop, and I put up a list. I didn't know what to do. I just put up a list. And like I said, remember, people get angry at people who they don't trust trying to sell steroids. So I got laughed at, and people were angry and threw insults at me. And then the moderators took my list down, like, after an hour. And And they were like, listen, this isn't how you do this. There's a process. You have to become a source. And they actually clued me into what the process was.
Yeah.
Here's the steps you have to take if you want to do this. So I did it. It was actually an arduous process. It wasn't very easy. It took me a long time, but I actually completed all the steps. And now I had a source tag put on there.
Okay.
Well, even if you have a source tag, there's like 1,000 sources on that forum.
Yeah.
And people only use like the top 20 or 30 and the rest of them nobody uses because they're, they don't have enough reviews, right? So just because I was a source tag does not mean that I'm in the game. So what I did is from that first list I put up, I had a couple ambassadors reach out and say, hey, listen, you're the only person selling British Dragon on here. We like British Dragon. I'm not going to buy anything from you because I don't trust you. However, if you send me things and I get it and it's good, I will post about it. And how the users have a certain a score attached to them.
Yeah.
If they've been trusted members of the community for a long time, they have a high score.
Yeah.
So one of these guys had a really, really high score. And so I sent him some stuff. He received it, and then all of a sudden one day just started posting about it. This is good. And he just started sending people to me. And I told him the more people we got, I would just always give him free stuff, right? So I instilled a few simple business practices that nobody else was using at the time. Steroid dealers are not masters of business administration. So they were using really poor practices. At the time, now everybody does this now, but at the time they were using snail mail. It was taking 2 weeks to a month for everybody to get their products.
Oh yeah.
They had terrible customer service.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And some of them would get this they would become manic from all the sycophantish behavior, because when you're a source, you have what people need, and people kind of treat you like you're almost like a god, right?
Yeah.
And they would become manic over this, and they would start treating their customers badly. If anybody dare question them, then they would get angry and start yelling at people. And I'm looking at other sources doing this. Is why are you ostracizing your own client base? Like, why would you do that? And I vowed I would never do that. It's good customer service. It's fast shipping. So that's something I changed that nobody else was doing at the time. I did priority shipping, so everybody got their products in 2 or 3 days.
Nice.
And then I just undercut the rest of the market.
Yeah.
So when I did this, word started getting out. Everybody started talking. Oh, I got my package in 3 days. Everybody was like, 3 days? You got your package in 3 days? And I just bum rushed.
I bet.
And then, the customer service, I was really knowledgeable about this. So I would help people with their protocols. I mean, that's what I did most days and I'll tell you how I set the operation up. But towards the end, I was just dealing with the customer face, and I would help people look at blood work. I would suggest protocols, and I got to see how they worked out with thousands and thousands and thousands of different people.
Yeah.
How all these different compounds and how different people reacted. And so I could start to see percentage trends and percentage of populations and how they move with different combinations and different compounds. So when I started this, at the time I only worked because I had a felony from before. I had addiction issues when I was younger.
Okay.
And I got 2 DWIs from alcohol addiction, and so I had a felony on my record. Right. So I couldn't get a job, even though I had a degree. I couldn't get a job, so I just worked as a kind of a low level, just a lab tech in a emergency room. I only made like $300 a week at the time. I couldn't even support myself. It was, I wasn't making ends meet. And even though I was also selling some steroids, I lived in a small city. It wasn't super lucrative. So when I started this, I was hoping I could make $200 or $300 extra dollars a week.
Right.
I was because that would make me comfortable. I would be able to pay all my bills, and I would be okay if I made that much. I thought that would be too much, though. I didn't see how I was going to get that many clients to make that much money. Well, when I started this and I said that everybody bum rushed me, within 6 months, I was bringing in $21,000 a week.
Wow.
I just absolutely blew up.
We're in the wrong business, Dave.
It blew up. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger from there. Then we're making 30, 50,000. There was a couple weeks when other big suppliers would go down, I remember when Big D Pharmaceuticals went down, everybody had to come and they just came to the next guys down the line, and I was one of them. And there was a few weeks in there where I made 500,000 a week.
Wow.
From after they a couple of the other big guys went down. So the operation, really quick, I'll get to how I started making it and how I made my own brand too.
Oh, okay. So you made your own brand.
At first I was just reselling British Dragon. I wasn't making my own yet. So, so we had.
Well, tell us about that. Tell us about that. How you made your own brand.
Okay.
I want to hear about that, and then I want to hear about how it went, how things fell apart after that.
Sure. Okay, so I started making my own because I noticed the IP China source was getting flaky sometimes. Sometimes they'd disappear. Sometimes there was a point back a while ago when they, I don't know, probably in 2005 or 6ish, where they disappeared for like 4 months.
Yeah.
Then they disappeared for a month here and there, and I was starting to say, okay, if all my eggs are, I need to build a more robust system. I don't have contingencies in place. I don't have any redundancies, so all my eggs are in one basket. If this source goes, I'm done. Right?
Sure.
So I need another option. So I started to look at reselling other brands. They were all more expensive, and I would have to raise my prices. And my thing was I'm undercut the rest of the market, right? So I didn't want to do that. I had this friend in the small city I was in. There was just a few steroid dealers. We all knew each other. We were all amicable, right? So one of them taught himself how to make stuff.
Yeah.
And some of my clients would say, "Hey, this guy, I got some stuff from him." He goes, "It was a little shady. It was sketchy. It came without a label. It was just in a vial without a label." He goes, "But I took it and it worked really, really well. Like, it's good stuff." So I knew he was making his own. It just wasn't professionalized, right? And I thought, well, if I could get with this guy to make us stuff en masse, and I could professionalize it, then we could have something here. So I hadn't told. One of the things I did pretty well is I had to keep quiet what I was doing in my own area, because how we were going to get busted was the local cops. If the local cops get wind of what we're doing and they come in. So I did a good job of just not telling anybody. So nobody really knew what I was doing. So I met him out and I presented the idea to him. I remember his jaw was just open, because I had to show him, like, okay, look at all this money I'm making. I had to prove it to him, kind of. So I said, and I had my login behind Eroids, my source tag behind Eroids, and I had my login. I was like, look at all these patients I have. Look, there's an opportunity here. If you can make these in large and mass and large vats, and we could put it in vials, and I'll professionalize it. I'll get somebody to do the labels. We could have something here. And I offered him a chance to make more money than he'd ever seen before. So, by the end, he was like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we started making our own. And then I had him teach me too, because at the time there was no information on how to do it on the internet.
Yeah.
You couldn't find it. Now it's everywhere. Right?
Basically every third listener is like, oh, I don't buy stuff. I just make it.
Yeah,
right. So from there,
it wasn't that common back at this time.
Did you eventually start making it on your own from there then, and just, do it without that guy?
No. Well,
okay.
He stayed with us. I had to get 5 chemists. I had to get that's how much we were making. I was getting in 10 kilos a week of powders.
Wow.
And we were making it all every week, and we were doing serious numbers. So that's how I started making it. So I named this, I called this Matrix, and you can still Google this today, Matrix Lab Steroids. And if you go to that, remember the last 2 reviews are when I got busted. So people are like, oh, I didn't get my stuff, like this and that. But those are from busted. If you go below that, there's just tons of reviews of this stuff is fire. This is the best stuff.
Yeah.
So when we made this, I called it Matrix Labs. I told them to make it a little stronger, make it a little more potent, right? Make it a little stronger, the label says, because I wanted a good name, right? So we did that, but see, because we were making it now, my profit margins went up. I was doing, I think my profit margins were like 80%, and then my profit margins went up to like, I'm trying to remember now. My profit margins went up. We'll just say that.
Can you give us just a basic idea? Somebody's gonna buy their own. I'm gonna do a cycle or whatever, and I decided like I only need 2 test sip and 2 mass D. I'm paying, let's say just, for the sake of the conversation, that cycle came out to $200. What would you guesstimate cost would be on the other end for the guy who's actually putting it together and sending it out?
Oh yeah. So for a 10 milliliter vial, it probably cost us, and it's probably cheaper now than it was then. It cost us like $2.50 for a 10 milliliter vial.
Yeah.
Were you selling to resellers, or were you mainly selling to end user?
No, yeah, we were selling directly to the user. Yeah. So when I introduced Matrix Labs, I put it on my list, and I put it next to the British Dragon stuff, right? And I didn't expect it to sell because, again, remember, people don't want to do products they don't trust. So I didn't expect it to sell very well. I priced it a little cheaper, and we had stronger stuff too. But I didn't expect it to sell very well. Again, people don't want to trust things that they haven't seen before. Well, as soon as I put the Matrix Labs there, everybody moved to the Matrix Labs. Everybody. Nobody even bought the British Dragon anymore. And then I learned, I didn't even realize at the time, but I was the brand, right? I had established myself. I had developed the trust. Whatever I put out there, and for rightfully so, I did a lot of work to I had these testing protocols too. So and at the time, again, there was no labs. I couldn't send my stuff away to labs to have it tested and get a lab result back. There's no lab that would do that. Now you can do that. So I crowdsourced. I gave people these vials. So when you start becoming a big seller like this, the Chinese, I had 100 different sources trying to sell me their powders. So I took samples from all of them, and we'd make it, and then I'd crowdsource, and I'd have, we tried ourselves first to make sure it was real, and then I'd send it to different good clients that wanted to help, and we'd have them take injections and then get blood work. Right now, everybody's blood work is going to be different, but at least we'd have an idea how high is 1 milliliter of this bringing your blood results. Right. So, and I did that for everything, and I probably had hundreds and hundreds of my own clients helping me test all this stuff, and we did the same thing with HGH. Right, take 10 IUs, go get in 3 hours, go get a human growth hormone blood serum test. I want to see how far it raises your levels. So we were the only company testing like this, right? Again, you couldn't send it to labs. I didn't hear of any other companies testing like this. So there was probably a while when we had some of the best quality in the world because I had hundreds of sources. I narrowed it all down to the top 3 that were most consistent. And we had this stuff. Well,
how did it fall apart then? Because this right now, man, it sounds like you're on
it
easy
was
street.
fantastic. Yeah.
These are great. Just keep this going for another couple of years, and then
well,
retire.
We lasted for 6 years. So when the Matrix Lab stuff hit, it blew up even more because it was so potent. And everybody was just so, from every forum, people were raving about this Matrix Lab stuff. You got to go try this Matrix Lab stuff. So we just doubled our client base really quickly from the Matrix Labs, and then it just kept going up and up. So I guess if we want to get to the downfall, there was a lot of problems, a lot of problem solving. Collecting money was a problem. Do you know how hard it is to collect millions and millions of dollars anonymously? It's really difficult. So that's kind of how my operation worked, right? At first I was doing it all myself. Then I was like, I can't do this myself anymore. I got to get help. So I had to hire, and you can't hire the best people. I can't take resumes, from the best people. I got to hire the people in my network who are willing to get involved in a large scale criminal operation. But I had to we had shippers, right? And so everybody was compartmentalized. And this way, if everybody only knows their job and they don't know anybody else in the operation, then you can't bust the whole thing.
Yep.
Right? So that was the idea, is we're going to compartmentalize this. I had shippers and they don't know anybody else in the operation, and I spread it throughout the country. This way, it's not all in one spot. So if one thing gets busted, the whole thing doesn't go down, right? And this actually worked because we got a part got busted and we were able to keep going. And I had shippers, money collectors, an army of money collectors. I had receiving houses to receive all this stuff. And then chemists. And I had 5 shippers, 5 chemists at one time, all making just thousands of vials a week. And so I guess we can go one day. I had a personal assistant who started, because I was so busy, I didn't have time to do simple things. So I had a personal assistant just doing daily things that I needed done. Well, she got wind of kind of what was going on, and that the people in my illegal operation were making a lot of money, and so she wanted in. So I was like, okay, all right, listen, I have one shipper who's doing a really bad job. He was addicted to Adderall and he couldn't think straight. So I was like, why don't you just take over shipping for him, and you can do that. So the problem with her is that she wasn't compartmentalized. Because she had been my personal assistant, she was privy to more information about the operation than anyone else. So when she started, she kind of had an idea how the whole thing worked. She was able to put it together. I never sat down and told it to her, but she was able to put it together just from being around me and seeing how I kind of operated everything. One day we had chemists make it in a different part of the state, and then we actually wrapped it up and put it in vacuum sealed it, put it in bubble wrap, and then they'd ship it to a shipper in another state, right? And the whole idea of spreading it out again was compartmentalization, and to spread it out so so the whole thing didn't go down if one part went down. So I don't know what the mail carriers must have done. They must have just destroyed this thing, because it was really well sealed, and somehow it broke and leaked through. Now, when it leaks through, they're allowed to open the package to make sure that there's nothing hazardous inside. So when they open this package, they see it was like 3 different boxes full of probably about $300,000 worth of steroids. And when they opened this, they sent to the police to the house that it was addressed to. And that's where I made one of my mistakes too, is after this, I developed receiving houses that were clean. But at this time I didn't think, and I sent it right to the shipper's house, and they have products in their house, right? So the thing is that the post office called her and told her that they were going to open the packages because it was leaking. And she said, no, don't, I'll come get it. They opened it anyway. And then, so we knew they were coming. So I didn't live in the state at the time, so I called somebody else and had them go clean this girl's house out. The cops showed up and there was only a little bit of stuff left. So everybody there got like the lowest level felonies for possession that you could get, right? But they didn't get in trouble for the stuff that was shipped because nobody possessed that, right? Yeah. So it was just actually pretty low level. Nobody was going to spend any time in jail. They were going to get these low level felonies. They probably would have got what we call in the United States ACDCs, which is a conditional discharge. If you're good for 6 months, they just throw the charge out, right? However, the police just scared this girl. The other guy that got caught too, he just shut his mouth, and I got him a lawyer. But they scared her. I don't know if you've ever been interrogated. They tell you you're going to do all kinds of time, and they're going to get your family, and they're going to do all this stuff. So they just try to terrify people. Well, she just spilled the whole thing that she knew. Again, this was only New York State. I lived in New York, or I actually lived in New Jersey at the time, but the operation started in New York State. So this was only in New York State at the time. So they had all this information. I got a lawyer for the other guy. So we're kind of being fed inside information from this other lawyer. Yeah. And he said that it didn't look like the feds were going to pick this up. It wasn't quite big enough for them. And so that was it. Those two got low-level felonies, and that would be it. They didn't have jurisdiction to come get me because I wasn't in the state. They didn't have jurisdiction to do anything outside the state. So
I thought that once it was in the U.S. mail, it was federal.
Well, yeah, so... But the feds decided they didn't want to pick it up. That's what the lawyer told us.
I see.
And as far as they knew, they didn't. Well, that postal worker ended up pushing and pushing. I don't know why he had a hard on for me, but eventually he did get Operation Cyber Juice to pick it up. Now I didn't know it. Nobody knew at the time. They were developing they were developing a special organization to deal with internet steroid. And now, for people out there worried, I don't think they're going to do it again because it was not met. When Operation Cyber Juice took down like 15 or so different UGLs, it was not met with a lot of praise. People were like, why are you wasting our money on something that really isn't that big of a problem? Right? And a lot of people were detractors of the whole. I mean, you know how many millions it must have cost to run that operation, and nobody really gave a shit about steroids, right? So anyway,
that wasn't it. Obviously
we kept going. Well, so we stopped, right? And then all the guys got to me and they were like, they were like, why don't we keep going? Like, we'll just stay out of New York. Look, it's ending there. You know, everybody else wanted to make all their money and everything. So I was like, okay, are you guys all good with going? And everybody was like, yeah, let's keep going. So we just stayed out of New York. We had the operation running in the rest of the country. And we just kept going. And it got bigger and better. And then, but that whole time they were doing investigation. It took them a little over 2 years of investigating to finally come down on us. And then to December 21st, 2015, or September 21st, 2015, everybody simultaneously throughout the whole United States got busted at the same time. They organized like a simultaneous strike, and they busted us all. So I lived in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan. I had this like $9,000 a month apartment overlooking Manhattan. It was gorgeous. And they all of a sudden I get this knock on the door, pound at like 5 a.m. And I'm like, did I really just hear that? My dogs start barking. I'm like, did I hear that? My girlfriend at the time, she got up and like went out there, and I heard it again. I'm like, I can't believe somebody's knocking. What time? It's 5 a.m. So I'm getting my shirt on and my clothes on, and then I go out there. The dogs are barking. My girl's coming back from the door, and she's like, I can't see out the peephole. They're blocking it. And I got mad. I'm like angry. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go tell this person you don't knock on my door. You don't pound on my door at 5 a.m. So I ran out there and I just swung the door open. I was about ready to scream at somebody. It's about 15 DEA agents with vests on and guns pointed at my head.
Holy crap.
And the guy who was in front, he put his hand on the door and he was like, okay. And he said that for two reasons. Okay, because I was nonviolent. He was like, okay to everybody behind him. Like, I'm nonviolent. I don't have any guns. So they didn't, pointing the guns at my head was unnecessary. And he was also saying, okay, I finally got you. So and this was the guy who had a hard on for me for some reason. He really pushed to get this picked up by the feds. Huh. And eventually he got his wish. And he wanted to be there to like lead the charge. He was a postal investigator.
Oh, okay. He was the guy who
was
pushing
the guy
for
who
it all
pushed
along.
it. Yeah. And he felt it necessary to tell me that. But
Good God, man.
for some reason, when I was there, like I had this little bit of solace because the cops, they came in, they handcuffed us, they set both of us down. They're like, do you know why we're here? I said, I have no idea. I knew why they were there. I knew why they were there. And then they, but the cops were looking around my apartment overlooking floor to ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. They're like, this is a beautiful place. I cannot believe how nice this is. For some reason, that gave me a little bit of solace because the cops were jealous of my house.
Man, Dave. So Dave is an expert witness in defense cases in the UK. Of course, steroids are legal for possession in the UK. Yeah. And if somebody gets busted, there's a potential that they could say, hey, it was for personal use. Mm-hmm. Dave, do you think you would be able to defend in this case?
Well, I didn't have any. That's the thing. I never touched a product. But I mean, again, like
at this point,
I never touched a product. It went right from my chemist to my shippers but I orchestrated the whole thing, right? But with United States conspiracy laws, all they need is the other people in my indictment, my co-defendants and all they need is for them to say, yes, that's the guy. Yeah. And if enough of them say that, then that's it. That's all they need. They don't need any more evidence. And to be honest with you, they didn't have a ton of evidence linking me directly to anything. All they had was these 10, there's 12 other people.
What did you use for support or proof of income?
Nothing.
So you couldn't, so there's a big hole there.
Yeah, there was a lot of money there that was unaccounted for.
Al Capone style, you know?
Yeah. Well, so I take it back. It's not that I didn't use anything. I take that back. I mean, I was a bad criminal, but I wasn't that terrible. So I did start getting some properties. I had 5 houses, and I did not just buy those outright. I had them owner financed so that it looked, and the contract stated I paid just X amount per month for however many years. What I do is I actually just go give them the cash for the houses. But I intentionally made it look like I paid it off over time. So then I had the rental income that I could do. I also did claim that I had a personal training business. So I did claim some money that way. It wasn't nearly what I actually made, though. So
right,
it wasn't worth a brand new Jaguar and a in a $9,000 a month apartment and only five
penthouse.
houses.
That's insane, man. Hey, let me ask you this: do you ever think about going back when that first bust happened in New York and just saying, "Hey, just cut it right there"? Would you think you would have been okay had you just cut it there and been like, "Guys, we're just going to move on with life. It was great while it lasted"?
Yeah. It's a great question, and I want to tell you why it's a great question, because I think one of the things I tried to do in my book, and one of the things that I tried to do, is explain the mentality of someone who runs one of these operations, and explain like what drives somebody on in the face of such danger. There was a point when I first started, right, and I first had $100,000 cash in my house, like I panicked. And I was like, I'm not a man who's prone to anxiety or panic attacks, but if I ever had one, it was right then. I had too much money, and I was just like, this got too big. I can't do this anymore. And I started an exit plan right then. And then and I think this is a good way to describe it. Why I don't think I could have stopped. And that's why people can't stop. I mean, when you're running something this big, and a lot of people just try to wrap it up in this neat greed box, right? They said, oh, you just got greedy. And then they just wrap it up in this neat box and throw it out because, okay, that describes it. Greed is not the right word to describe it. When I had a panic attack and I thought, I got to stop. I'm going to get in trouble. This got too big. It's out of hand. And I made an exit plan where I was going to fill the rest of the orders that I had, because I'm moral. I'm not going to like just quit I'm not going to quit on people who actually paid me money. So fill the rest of the orders that people paid for. And then I was just going to tell everybody else, okay, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I used to get emails every single day, and I still do to this day, with people telling me, thank you. Thank you for making me a better man to my wife, a better husband to my wife, a better father to my children, and a better supporter of my family. Because now they have the energy to play with their kids. They have the gumption or the confidence to go out and make moves to make more money and support their family better. Right? So, and I used to get that every single day. Still do. Now, when I have 1,000 people, well, at the time I had this was back in the beginning when I had like 1,000 clients probably. I had 20,000 over the time, but when I thought of these 1,000 people and how they're thanking me and showing me admiration and appreciation, this elicits a large dose response: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. We evolved mechanisms to be social creatures. Human species survives better when you help others survive. So we evolved mechanisms to be addicted to helping people. You're addicted to these neurotransmitters: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. You're supposed to be.
I can relate to that 100%. That's what with the podcast, it's like helping other people, giving back, having that purpose in adding something positive to humanity. It definitely is it's far greater reward than the money. That said, it sure would be nice to have that apartment too.
The money was, I'm not going to say the money was terrible. I'm not going to say that. The money was great.
Of course.
But that's not what drove me on. I had the money in my hand and I was about ready to quit. What made me move forward was I got to go tell 1,000 people that I can't help them anymore because I'm having a little anxiety right now. That they're going to have to go back to living their suboptimal lives of despair just because I don't know if I can handle this. And that made me just say, screw this. I can do this. I just picked my head up. I said, I can do this. And from then on, I put my head down and I moved forward, and I just kept driving forward to help more people. And, the whole time, what I do now, what I did then, my why never changed. It's always about helping people. From the very beginning, when I started saying, why do I feel this way? Let me research this. And then I wanted to show other people, like, look how much better life can be when you optimize your hormones. And the whole time it was that. And so no, at a point in the middle, can you just quit and say, I'm done with all this? A smart guy probably would, right? But there are bigger things going on with sense of purpose, sense of if I don't do this, what do I do? How do I take that large of a dose response from thousands of people telling me, thank you, you've really helped my life, to going to know people doing that, right? Yeah. I mean, so, I don't think I could have quit. And then, what another question I always get?
What's that?
Is, was it worth it? I got sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. I did about, with good time, and I did some programs I did about a little over 4 years.
Was that federal prison?
Yeah, it was federal. Yeah. And people say, was it worth it? And I always say, you're goddamn right it was.
I don't even want to ask you if you got to keep any of the money. I don't want to know.
No, I didn't.
I don't want to know. Don't tell me.
Well, honestly, so I was not a great criminal, right? Like all these people, especially when I was in prison, people were like, oh man, I would have buried that shit. And this, I didn't do any of that. I had houses in my name. I had everything in my name. So, and they seized my bank accounts and everything. Everything was pretty much gone. Like I didn't plan very well. I was a pretty bad criminal.
Right on. Dude, that is a freaking incredible story. And I know we kind of pushed you through it a little faster, but it's crazy. And I know you have a manuscript. You mentioned book. Is that the book you're talking about?
Yeah. It's on it's by chapters. It's on a website called Fictionate Me.
Okay.
Fictionate.me. But yeah, I could give it to you if you want to put it. It's a really fascinating story because inside of this, the quick rendition I gave you, there's so many nuances and so many things that happened and crazy things that happened that, you know, a lot of the stuff just pushed it forward, but it could have broken at this point, but it got pushed forward because it is a really interesting story.
Yeah, for sure. Give me that link when we're done. I'll be sure to put that in the description. Hey, Dave, out of the defense cases that you've worked in the UK, had you worked with anything at that level, at that size?
Ish.
Close.
Done a few labs where turnover's been in the millions, yeah.
How would that have gone down by UK standards? As far as
the sentence would have been so I'd need to know numbers, because the sentencing is very much based on the financial gain.
Okay,
so
but figure like the highest end thing you've seen. How comparatively to it, how would that have gone down?
Well, I say it all depends on the numbers. So, I mean, I didn't do the case, but the Alpha Pharma case, they got pretty hefty sentences.
Look, what are we talking?
They estimated 42 tons over, I think it was 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
Oh, wow. So in the United States, it's a Schedule 3 controlled substance, so it's not like cocaine or heroin.
Yeah, it's the same in the UK, but they still base it on what they look at when they look at sentencing. Obviously, part of it is the drug. Part of it is the impact on the social aspect, i.e., are people getting hurt by it? So what's the crime associated with it? Yeah. And then the rest of it is financial. How much money are they making? And that weighs heavily in the sentencing.
So in the United States, it's just the amount of drugs, and then they cap the amount of drugs. So I was like, they just maxed it out, the amount of drugs, because it was
super heavyweight
max, but they cap it. And then the financial, they don't use for sentencing. They use that in fraud cases. The amount of gains is, or however much money was lost, that ties to your sentence. But for drugs, it's just the amount of drugs. And for the financial, they only take that to know how much they can seize from you.
Okay.
So they were able to seize all my houses and everything.
Yeah, we have what's called a POCA, so it's Proceeds of Crime Order, which is basically a financial order against you for... Now, that is going to be generally estimated around what they know they can get out of you. Mm-hmm. So there's no point in them putting a 10 million POCA against you if you've got £2 million worth of assets. Right. It's just not worthwhile doing. But it will play in the sentencing because how they look at it is the financial gain denotes the size of the criminal operation. Yeah. So if it was a large criminal operation, obviously there's going to be a large financial gain. Mm-hmm. So as a result, the reverse of that is if they can show large money transactions running through you, then it gives them an idea of the scale of the operation. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you do in reports is you estimate the value of not just the drug seized, but the value of the operation, or you can do. So let's say it was a £10 million a year operation, you would probably be looking at north of 10, 15 years.
Wow.
But it also very much depends on where the court case is. And I'm sure that'll be the same in the States because of the different states. Different states will take a different view on how they sentence a crime, and it's the same here. One court I've seen people where there's been very little financial evidence, but they still get 4 or 5 years. I've seen people where there's been a great deal of financial evidence, but they've only got a couple of years. So it does vary quite significantly. Of recent times, they've got harsher with the sentencing.
Really?
And it's the financial aspect that's driving it. So they have got harsher with the sentencing based on the financial aspect. They can also get harsher with the sentencing if they know there's been a great financial gain, but there's not much to recover. So they'll look at, right, okay, we know this operation's been doing, let's stick with the 10 million a year. We know this operation's been running for several years, but this fucker's only got £600,000 worth of asset. Where's the money? So if they can't find the money, they'll put you away so you can't use it.
Man. Yeah.
So there are limitations, there are guidelines, but these can be breached. A judge can go above or outside of the guidelines if he feels it's warranted, and then it's down to the person that's been sentenced to appeal that. But obviously, if you've got evidence showing, large transaction or large amounts of drugs being moved, even if you don't have any asset from that, it's like, well, where did that money go? That money went somewhere, and you ain't giving it to charity. So, you then are in a position where it's difficult to prove why your sentence should be overturned.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm waiting for the movie to come out. I feel like this would make an incredible movie, and at least everybody in the bodybuilding community would go check it out. Hey, listen, while we've got you here, Ryan, and while we've got the show running, we generally, our show, we generally do listener questions. And by the way, I want to throw this out there, guys. If you're new to our content and you haven't subscribed, let me encourage you to subscribe and definitely hit the bell. We find that far fewer of our subscribers have hit the bell compared to average channels. If you hit the bell, that's the only way that you can find out when new content is coming out. And we take everybody's listener questions. I wanted to try to squeeze a couple of these in. And with your experience, I'm sure you're a guy who's going to have some insights, and you can probably help some people too. So sure. We'll just run through these quickly. But one of them from DK, new Patreon guy, he's got a topic for us. He says, good afternoon, love the podcast. I just joined Patreon and wanted to ask a question. Let's see. He wanted to first go into his history. He's 46 years old. 3 years ago, he started back consistently with lifting to try to get his body back, so to speak. He was 398 pounds when he started at 6'1" in December of 2024. I was finally down. Then December of 2024, he was down to 264. I went through a little bulk in the holidays and went up to 280, and then decided to go to try a TRT clinic in January 2025, so not too long ago, to start on its program, because I was beginning to lose my stamina and energy. He said that his natural test was 737, I'm sure that's a U.S. range, and was placed on 180 milligrams of test sip a week, along with enclomiphene and Arimidex for AI. I just got my 8 weeks blood work done, and I'm sitting at 1,560 tests, 50 estrogen. I'm trying to bodybuild, nothing stage-wise, but I want to finally put on the size and look very lean. Look, at this point, it's more for a personal thing. I don't want to start something crazy, but more at the low end and do a slow build and cut with lower doses, if that makes sense. Let's see. So he says, skip down a little bit here. So on TRT, adding in Primo, NPP, MAST, and maybe some Clen. I watched your podcast and Dave on low dose cycles, and was wondering what hypothetically a cut April through July would yield using 200 test, 75 NPP weekly, 100 Primo weekly, 100 MAST weekly. I have some fat around my gut to get off, but just an idea if I am on the right track. I have spent the last 3 weeks ironing out my diet and have dropped 9 pounds while still on just TRT doses. He's at 22% body fat at 271 right now, and ideally he'd like to see 230 with some added size. So, guys,
right, what's the body fat percentage?
He says 22% at 271. And I saw you kind of roll your eyes there, right? Or your eyes got wide, not rolled them. Your eyes got wide when he said through his TRT clinic, he's using testosterone, anastrozole, and enclomiphene. Do you have some thoughts on that out the gate?
Yeah, I don't like enclomiphene. It essentially it's a SERM, right? Selective estrogen receptor modulator that blocks estrogen receptors. We've learned just how important estrogen is. We've evolved to convert testosterone to estrogen at a certain rate, a certain ratio for a reason. It's important to keep that ratio. Some people are sensitive to it, so sometimes we do have to control the estrogen. He's only taken 180 milligrams, and so he's taken a anastrozole and enclomiphene, 2 estrogen blockers. It's just I can't imagine he feels good off of that. I mean, maybe he does, but the first thing I would do is drop those 2 things. And so if he had a 730 nanogram per deciliter testosterone, and he's feeling symptoms of hypogonadism, it's a single to me. One of the reasons that would happen is where SHBG is really high. So if he's got high SHBG, we're going to have to dose the testosterone to whatever gets him at a healthy total testosterone SHBG ratio. And I don't know what that is, and I would like to look at those nuances before.
You would use testosterone to lower SHBG rather than specifically try and lower SHBG?
That's correct. SHBG is very important. It has non-genomic effects. So
no, I get that, but wouldn't you look to just bring SHBG down rather than overloading total test?
I wouldn't, because SHBG is very important. I've had people try to just bring down SHBG in the past, and once your SHBG, if you inhibit the production and you have low SHBG, you're going to have a lot of adverse side effects.
People aren't talking about that. I get that, man. If I start running, even like Anavar, say, my SHBG gets smashed, I feel like garbage. Not enough people are talking about this.
Actually, I did a whole deep dive video on it where I show the non-genomic effects, exactly what SHBG does, and why you desensitize to the androgens in your body when your SHBG gets low. Now, you probably need to get in the single digits before. I've come up with about 12 for SHBG, is where people have enough that they can still have the non-genomic effects and keep sensitivity. Of course, that's going to be different for everybody. This is a generalization, right? When you start to get into the single digits, you actually desensitize to the androgens in your body, and you can get symptoms of hypogonadism again. You can feel like garbage, erectile dysfunction goes down. I see it all the time. Getting SHBG up is a lot more difficult than just bringing it down by dosing your total testosterone to a healthy total testosterone SHBG ratio. SHBG plays such an important effect that nobody really understands, that I don't like just artificially lowering SHBG.
Okay. So how do you offset the negative drives you're going to get from, in this case, 1500 NGDL from around stuff like HDL, lowering hemoglobin increases and stuff like that?
The SHBG is going to act as a buffer. So even if you have 1500 or more and you have a high SHBG, you're not going to get adverse side effects, because a lot of the testosterone is going to be bound, and therefore you don't get the adverse side effects from it. What's important, the amount of free testosterone would then be in your ideal optimal range. Right. So I've had people with 100 males with 100 SHBG. We have to get their levels, their total testosterone, to like 25, 3,000.
Really?
Yeah. So what I'm struggling to get my head around is, why not just bring SHBG down to say 25, 30, and run a lower total test?
I've seen too many times is the SHBG keeps coming down, and then once it gets too low, you have a whole different set of problems, and it's hard to get SHBG up once you inhibit the production to the point where it's single digits. I don't like artificially lowering it.
So how would you inhibit SHBG to the point where it would keep getting driven down? Because obviously, generally speaking, elevated testosterone is going to drive SHBG down.
Yeah, androgens will do it, but hepatic lipids, tumor necrosis factor 4, and there's I go over it in the video now. I've forgotten, but so. Yeah,
but I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just trying to understand the situation. Yeah. So the way I understand situations is by questioning the fuck out of them. Mm-hmm. And then once I've challenged it, I get in my head how it works. If you introduce something to artificially lower SHBG, okay, we understand that's going to drive SHBG down. We know anabolics will drive SHBG down.
Yeah.
In most cases, not in everybody's cases. Otherwise, you wouldn't be running 3,000 to 100. Mm-hmm. But surely all you do is reduce the factors that are driving SHBG down, wherever your choice may be, and allow to stabilize SHBG once you get it to a level where you want it. So why would it continue to come down if you regulate the substance you're using to bring it down?
I guess I'm not sure what the question is. So
Right. So what my question was, why not bring the total test down and the SHBG down, and use something to bring the SHB down if the total test is not doing it?
Yes. Right.
Your response was that the problem is that the SHBG then becomes too low.
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying, so why aren't you just lowering the drug that's bringing SHB down to regulate it to a point which is optimal for where you want it?
So in all cases, the SHBG won't recover. It depends on the rest of the system. It depends on the reason for the increased production of SHBG in the first place, right? So if we just lower the SHBG, the factors to bring it back up may not be there. It may not come back up. And I'm not saying that it definitely wouldn't. I've just seen it in the past where it stays down. And now when we try to do other things, it continues to go down, and the next thing to know, the person's in single digits. Now, if there's a factor like say just a genetic predisposition where the person just produces a large amount of SHBG for one reason or another, then yeah, I suppose it would come back up. I've just learned so much about the importance of SHBG. I just don't like to artificially reduce it. It's just
I see where you're coming from. I might be in a middle ground where I would think like, could I lower it with boron, something like that?
I just
and I see what you're saying though too, that because I'm with you 100%, man. I don't want it to be too low.
Yeah.
Whereas I do feel like there is an idea in bodybuilding that like we take things to the extreme, right? So you're if low SHBG is good, let's freaking crush it,
Yeah, right. Fucking, I'm on 600 mega Primo and I'm running Proviron. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave, let me answer your question with this though. So oxyandrolone, some of the oral.
Oh, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just curious as to where you are from why you're doing it.
But I do have a case where I have kind of done what you said with an androgen that notoriously significantly reduces SHBG. So oxyandrolone notoriously significantly inhibits the production of SHBG. So I have taken people, especially females with like 190 SHBG, and we say, listen, I got to give you some oxyandrolone so we can just really inhibit this production because you're just producing way too much SHBG. And we can't give you testosterone because the estrogen conversion, estrogen will increase the production of SHBG. So we got to keep your estrogen at a reasonable level, and we got to get your androgens up and inhibit the production. So I sort of do what you're saying, Dave, but I just use an androgen to do it instead of like boron, instead of artificially doing it with like boron or something like that.
So what's your thoughts on Proviron?
Yeah, Proviron. Yeah, I mean, Proviron is DHT.
See,
the DHT.
Yeah, it's anabolic technically, though not much use as an anabolic.
Yeah,
the thing is, you see, so the TRT setup in the UK is vastly different to the US.
Right.
In that TRT over here, you're getting tests, you're not getting anything else.
And that's boring.
You're not prescribing NFR, you're not prescribing. You're not prescribing anything else. So I would say I'm just curious as to the differences and how you go about it.
Proviron would be another good one.
Let me ask you guys this. So he's proposing that he gets on this cycle. Cycle is going to be 200 tests per week, 75 NPP per week, 100 Primo per week, and 100 mast per week.
My personal opinion would be unless he's running the Primo specifically for some sort of joint support, or that's his thought process behind it. Sorry, the MPP. Sorry. Then I don't see the MPP being particularly useful for him, particularly
for a whole week. Yeah.
Well, it's not a lot, but two, this is someone who has very obviously got a predisposition towards body fat. So we've got, we haven't lost these fat cells; they've just shrunk. So I would see any real use for the MPP. I don't see any real reason to have it in there unless his thought process is around some sort of potential joint support from it.
Yeah. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah. So, kind of like, I think what Dave is alluding to here is a lot of people, especially beginners, they think that I need to design something that uses all kinds of these different things, and I want to use 5 different compounds and really, really dial something crazy in and get really complex and complicated. That's not how That's not how the pros are doing it. That's not how the guys are really good at this are doing it. Let's just use one compound, and then if we need to add something to mitigate or to help us reach a goal, that's fine. I don't kind of like Dave's saying, I don't think test, NPP, Primo, and Mast is all necessary together. Let's just do test and Primo. Let's just do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or test and Mast. Yeah. So here's another spot where my experience comes in. I sold a ton of test, a ton of Primo, and a ton of Masteron. So here's what I see. As far as the DHT derivatives that we're using to kind of help mitigate estrogenic side effects, that would be Primo, Proviron, Masteron. The order that I saw it worked the best for people is the testosterone and Primo works the best for most people. The next would be Proviron, actually. And then lastly is Masteron. Now, there are some people that do really well off of Masteron, better than Primo. But if we want to talk about percentages of populations, most people react in that order from adding those compounds to testosterone. There certainly are people who do best on Proviron, or some people do best on test and Masteron. But
I would have had Mast above the Proviron, but that's the sort of experience. But the thing is, with the Mast, it's difficult to measure because you're not going to see it in blood work. You're only going to see it by the person's experiences.
Yes.
And unfortunately, people's experiences can be misleading if they're not experienced in using anabolics, because they will start to tell you stuff that isn't actually happening one way or another.
My main concern with this guy is, I mean, he's still holding a good amount of body fat, right? And he was coming from being, pretty obese when he first started. It sounds like he's made some incredible progress. And I do like the idea of him keeping the doses low. I've been leaning more toward this with a lot of the more non-competitor average guys that just want to get into better shape, is that if we go in and we try to hit you with a big cycle, the clock is ticking from the time we get on that cycle. We're going to have to get off that cycle a lot. And you only have so many weeks then to get into shape with that compound in. I would encourage him, obviously check your blood work, but with something where if you're doing 200 test and 200 Primo or 200 test, 200 Mast, you might be able to run that pretty long term. And as long as your blood work looks good, you could continue just freaking keep dieting down. And then in the end, he is going to end up with more muscle, but I wouldn't take any points where I'm like, okay, now I'm going to bulk. Now, it's not going to be to your benefit. In my personal opinion, maybe he needs a little diet break here and there when we're talking it could be a long-term project, but I would just keep focusing on every time just getting leaner, and eating protein 5-6 times a day, regardless of what you're doing with the carbs and the fats, and training hard. You've got that hormonal, addition in there. I think that he will continue to recomp in the process. It might not look as dramatic as when you're eating high calories and, getting all pumped in the gym, but especially for his case, that would be my thought, is just keep focusing on the fat loss.
Yep.
Well, I think he's going to need sustained period of maintaining low body fat before he can start to relax the diet in any way or push. I agree with the diet break situation, obviously, both from a mental aspect and from a bodily function aspect. Taking the foot off the gas a little bit, giving it a break from the low calories is definitely going to be positive. But I wouldn't go for a bulk, and I wouldn't go for a bulk once he reached his target body fat level. I would hold that for a good couple of months.
Easy.
Before I'd look to be pushing back up, otherwise the rebound is potentially going to be horrendous.
Yeah. How about this one? Okay, this is more of a comment. I want to get Ryan's take on this. Do you remember last episode, Dave, we talked about creatine and hair loss? We had a guy say to us, hey, can you guys talk about the very, big reality of creatine abuse causing hair loss? And I kind of was like, what? So I do a little bit of, digging. When I say a little digging, I did a Google search, right? And I see that there was some evidence to show increased dihydrotestosterone, but there was weak evidence to support hair loss. That said, we had a few people say, yep, I've noticed it. I start on creatine, I lose my hair. One guy said, yep, I coach guys. I've seen a few guys that start getting acne when they take creatine. And I wanted to get your take, man. In your experience, have you seen hair loss from creatine?
So I can tell you one thing that I have learned over time is not to be surprised by anything anymore.
Right?
Because you see so many different reactions, and there's a massive disparity between the way each individual reacts to different protocols, different compounds, different dosages, different levels, and different supplements, right? So what I would say is I don't have any I have never really put that into my brain to say, is this a thing or not? I didn't realize it was. I totally believe that there is a subset of the population that would experience hair loss from creatine, and it makes sense due to the DHT increase. So yeah, I'm not surprised by anything anymore. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, fair enough. That's kind of where we were at with it too. All right, we got just a couple more here. Somebody agreed with you, Dave, that we definitely needed to subsidize part of the Patreon for Dave getting a Pro Charger. Bro needs a Pro Charger. He's trying to make some boost. That's what he said.
Yeah, I think it's a worthy cause. Ryan, would you agree?
Run the channel or give Dave a Pro Charger. All right.
That's obvious. Pro Charger. It wins hands down every time.
Question for the next show.
For speed.
Do you think that, okay, another low dose question, putting 60 to 100 milligrams of deca, long acting, added to 125 test crews for my shoulder that's a little bit messed up would be worth it? Also, really need to get it looked at by a therapist.
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, I think it'll be beneficial. Yes, I think you'll see potentially improvement, but it does depend on what the injury is, what the problem is, as to how much that's going to impact. You know, we get this with TB and BPC. It's the cure to every injury. No, it's not. You know, it works for specific types of injury. It doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, in my experience, so this is how I use nandrolone to help people with joint pain is, we start off at a minimal, what I've seen is a minimal effective dose, and 60 milligrams is probably the least amount that you could use and still have benefits for some people. So we would just pop 60 milligrams on top per week on top of nandrolone decanate, and then you could slowly titrate that dose up until you had resolution of what you're looking for. Like Dave says, I've seen some people experience complete resolution. Some people just have a little bit, and depending on what the problem is, you may not have any resolution of that pain at all.
Yeah,
I believe there's some studies on around the 50 milligram dosing which proved to be quite effective, if I remember rightly.
I always started with like 200, and then from there I'm like, I need 200 for my joints, and then a little while later I'm like, why don't I just do 400? You know,
2 gram, mate. 2 gram.
Yeah, like a gram in nandrolone.
Yeah,
1.5 gram is the sweet spot. That 3 gram a test, honestly, mate, works really well. No joint problems whatsoever.
Now, I'm not sure about this one here. Do you have any tips to avoid muscle spasms with IM injections? I used to go IM all over my body with 1-inch pins, but now ventral glute is the only place I can do it without getting muscle. Now he says muscle twitches, so I see that as a little different. I wind up doing 6 times a week injection schedule with 2 big glute doses and small insulin syringe doses in between to smooth the hormone peak.
I would be curious as to when the twitch is occurring. Is it occurring during the injection, post-injection? Normally things like that, or nerve pressure of some sort. So I would suspect it's a volume of oil that's pressing on a nerve in some way. Sounds like his overall dosing is probably quite high. He hasn't said that, just with how he's described the volume and the number of injections he's doing. So I wonder if it's just an oil volume issue rather than anything specific.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think Dave is on point there. I've had people talk about. I've never had people. I don't think I've ever seen somebody who twitches every single time, but sometimes just from the poke and the initial spike, right? Every once in a while you can get your muscle twitches essentially. I've never had anybody say that happens every time. So no. I would think that Dave would be right. Like if there's pressure on your nerve that could be something. Maybe change the injections, like the exact spot you're doing the injection. Again, like Dave said though, depending on exactly when the twitch is occurring.
Yeah.
If it's during the injection, then that would be different than if it's happening right when you're when you're starting to stick the needle in.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we're about out of time, guys. But like I said, I wanted to make sure we got a few listener questions in, and you guys are welcome to leave us questions for the next show. Ryan, I'd love to have you back sometime, man.
Sure.
I can see you're a natural at just hanging with us and answering these questions. It would be fun to bring you back just to knock a bunch of this stuff out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I would love to. I really respect you guys. I've learned a lot from both of you too over the years, and I appreciate what you do, and I'd love to be a part of it. I'd love to continue to help people.
Oh, dude, it would be our pleasure. And hey, you said you do have a clinic now, a TRT, like above the boards. This isn't through your Safe Mail account clinic. This is the legit thing. What is that clinic?
Hormonesforme.com. Yeah, so I've partnered with a few different medical clinics, and we so I'm partnered with some providers, doctors, and nurse practitioners. So yeah, we can offer hormone replacement therapy, testosterone replacement therapy to 29 states and counting. We're getting more licenses.
All right.
As we go. So yeah, and I'm able to, the way we are is I'm able to offer protocols and consult and do the protocols, and then the provider has the final say. But I have partnered with providers who share my vision and understand that I do have a lot of knowledge in this. I've just experienced more than just about anyone could have, unless they had my history. So I'm able to use all that to really, really help people and fine-tune protocols and really design things. And we're doing really well. We're growing really well. And yeah.
That's cool, man. That's cool. And you still get to then provide your end goal, which is to help other people,
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Exactly. I get like something like this. I may have done this though, if I knew there was a way to do it legally.
Right.
Back then, like I may have tried to make that transition, right? But I didn't know until I researched it while I was in prison. I actually wrote the business plan for this while I was in prison.
Okay.
I read voraciously. I wrote the business plan, and then I researched enough to say, oh my gosh, there's a way I can do this legally. And had I known that, I may have I had enough money to probably make it happen.
Oh yeah.
That would have been something I would have done, is just transition to the legal side.
Well, it happened when it was meant to happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. Our histories, like a lot of people think or say, would you go back and change anything? And I have to say that my experiences, everything that ever happened to me, created the man I am today, put me in the position I am today to be able to do this. So I wouldn't change a thing.
I've heard the same thing from you too, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Despite how fucked I am.
Yeah.
Dave, do you have any Uncle Dave's wisdom for us today before we go?
I do. I actually do.
Do you? All right.
Yeah.
Dave shares wisdom with us every week. This is the most important part of the show.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
excited.
listen to Scott. That's my wisdom. I laid in bed last night and I thought of loads of fucking things, and I was unsure which way I was going to go with it. And one of the things I was thinking about was betting. Gambling. Not in the sense of gambling money, but in the sense of how much you're willing to risk in order to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever it may be it in a relationship, be it in work, be it in your physique. And I do think it's important that we have, I don't know what it's like in the States, but there's a big push over here in the UK to have all the gambling organisations, all the online gambling and betting have these options where you can snooze the app, or you can take time away, or you can set a financial limit so you can't spend any more.
Okay.
To try and combat, people getting addicted to gambling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good approach, at least in a sense where you have a stop point where you reassess in whatever it is you're gambling with, be it a relationship or be it your career. Have a point where you stop and assess and say, right, is this still worth the cost?
Yeah.
It is arguments of developing a business. You know firsthand right now how all-consuming a business can be, and how it's very easy to end up, even though you own the business, you become a slave to it.
Oh, yeah.
And it just never leaves you. It never stops. And it's very easy to get to a point where you're actually just working for the sake of it. And though you're earning an income, there's no quality of life anymore.
Sure.
Because you haven't had that stop point where you're like, you know what, I need a limit here. I need to stop myself from working as much as I do, or I need to stop myself from being over involved in training, or whatever it may be. You know, gaming, online, Dungeons and Dragons. You know, you come back and all you're doing is researching or spending time on social media in groups that support that interest or whatever, to the point where it becomes singular and there is no balance for anything else. So, I mean, it came from this thought about gambling, about the fact that you build in checkpoints or stop gaps so that you don't go too far down that road and lose yourself almost.
Yeah, I like that.
Very sage advice.
Mindfulness. There's some mindfulness to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, I like mindfulness, you know that anyway. I come to that quite a lot, but I just think it's sometimes you just need to stop and go, right. However difficult the question might be, and especially when it's your own business, is this still working for me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, am I still getting what I thought I was getting out of it, or have I become a slave to this to the point where it's no longer me in control, it's controlling me? And I think that's important around hobbies and sports and everything as well, where you can, bodybuilding is a prime example of getting lost in it.
Sure.
And becoming very one-dimensional because it's all you have in your life anymore, because you've alienated everything else and all other interests to support. I mean, Scott's a serial unaliver in training.
What?
He will one day be
Dave
on the
doesn't
news
have.
about.
They aren't allowed to have guns in the UK. So Dave thinks because I own guns that
Own
that
guns?
makes me a very dangerous man.
He's building an armory, and one day he's gonna build a killdozer and just go mad. And
Oh, Dave. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thanks for hanging and listening to Ryan's story. And of course, I'm going to put the link below for your book too, in case anybody wants to check that out. Man, it was a pleasure getting to talk to you. I've met you a couple times now, and this is the first time we've actually had the real conversation about what you've done. And I'm glad that I waited, man. I wanted to hear it from your mouth, but I'll look forward to looking at more in the book, and I encourage everybody else to check it out. And if people want to follow along with what you're doing, what's your social media?
Oh yeah, so Hormones for Me on YouTube, Hormones for Me on Instagram as well. But I can give you those links as well.
Cool.
And we can put them in. But yeah, we have an educational social media platform, YouTube. We do a lot of videos, go over studies, really show people how things work. And I can, what helps is to have all the experience. So now we can take the experiences. What's more important than the what the studies say is the empirical data, or what we actually see in the field. Right, so I can take what we've seen in the field and try to resolve that with what the studies say. So we kind of have a unique approach to addressing studies and resolve that with experience.
Hell yeah. So I'll put the links to that below, guys. Of course, reach out to Dave, and for coaching, reach out to myself, mcnallydiets@gmail.com. And for another episode of the podcast, guys, go to evalbloodanalysis.com to get your labs done by Dave. Supplementsource.ca for Canadians. Patreon, load us up with some Patreon questions for the next episode. And thank you to TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there, guys. For another episode of Drugs and Stuff, we'll see you soon. All right, so hit the stop button here, and let me...